Okay, so if we go back into the past, before the period that this course covers, some people argue that there are or there were some things that did make this area distinct. If you look at the area today, one of the things that's very obvious is that the population of some of the countries in Southeast Asia are enormous. That's something, however, that is very new. That's only come about in the past 200 years. If we were to go back before the period that this course begins, say in the late 18th century, what we would have found is something very different. A region where there was a lot of land and relatively small populations in most places, but not in some of the kingdoms. In a land filled with nature, obviously believing that nature is alive and powerful is a belief that was common across the area. But then again, that's something that's common to all populations everywhere in the world, so it doesn't really make the area entirely distinct. But it was something important there and something that continued. What was a bit more unique, however, was a kind of social institution that emerged in many places that was meant to deal with this fact that there was a lot of land but not many people. When you've got land but you don't have people, the thing that's important are the people. You need someone to do work for you. And so what emerged in many places in Southeast Asia was a system of slavery, debt bondage. There are huge debates over what we should call this. But essentially, in many societies, there were people who were at various degrees of indebtedness or bondage or enslavement to someone else. And this relationship could also be fluid in many cases, as people could move in and out of a state of being in bondage or enslavement to someone else. But it was something very characteristic about the region, and some people have argued that it influenced things like warfare. When you're in an area where there are not many people but lots of land and you go to war, well, what you want are their people. So one of the main goals of warfare was to capture people and bring them back to the place where you had your base. Did this mean that wars were not bloody or brutal, or that being hauled off in captivity was not horrific? No, it definitely was. But the aftermath of wars was often to get people rather than to take land. As a result, people knew this, and when they built their villages or their cities, they didn't build things that were meant to last forever because they knew there was a chance that they wouldn't be able to hold on to that area forever. So they built simple structures that could easily be built. If someone attacked and burned everything to the ground, that wasn't the end of the world because you could move back in and rebuild it relatively easily. And that was something quite distinct from, say, the areas of China, where much of the logic was to build big stone walls around an area because there were plenty of people, but what you needed was a land and a base, and that's what they did to ensure that. Another thing that people have argued was distinct about Southeast Asia is that in this world where people are important, then obviously women are going to be important as well, as you need all of the people that you can. And many people have made the argument that the status of women was higher in Southeast Asia than in other parts of the world. And one of the reasons why people have argued this is because Chinese and Europeans, when they first went to the region, they, among other things, found women doing work that they didn't do in their home societies, like working in the markets, and this surprised them. Well, let's think about this. Is women working in the market a sign that they have a higher status? Well, not necessarily, because in some of these societies, like Vietnam, for instance, elite men looked down on market work as something that was beneath them. So in having women do that, does it mean that they had higher status? Not necessarily. It meant that they did more, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they were appreciated more for that. That said, there are some things which counter that, and there were some of the first Europeans, such as Spanish missionaries in the Philippines, discovered something that really surprised them about the gender dynamics in the region. What did they discover? They discovered something called penis pins, or penis balls, or penis bells. I believe that YouTube is rated PG-13, so I can't get very graphic here, but imagine, if you will, a penis with a hole through it at the end, through which a rod would be stuck, and then little bells or balls or something on the side would be placed, so that when sexual relations, or when someone engaged in sexual relations, it would bring added pleasure to the woman. Alternately, there were small ball bearings under the skin of the penis for the same effect. Something very different from, say, the bound feet of China, and perhaps something that set the region apart. But yeah, I know when you resort to talking about penis pins, you're really running out of things to say. And this is not something that we can build a very solid understanding of a separate region on. So I need more help. Please, YouTube God, videos, I need help. What can possibly do?
Talk about material culture.
Material culture. Okay, I'll try that one. Let's go to material culture.